Hello and thank you for viewing this presentation. My name is Alexander Cooperschmidt and I'm a founder of Blue Glaciers Rescue Foundation 501c3 nonprofit organization. The reason I started this foundation is to change the focus to the melting glaciers and the land ice. And please pause and realize that everybody is just talking about melting glaciers, but there's nobody who is actually doing anything about that. Thus, I decided to start the foundation. When you watch this video, after you watch this video, you will know everything about climate change from the micro perspective, and you will have an idea what needs to be done. First, let me just tell you about my credentials. I have a bachelor degree in physics, and I've done extensive research on climate change. I examine various data. I listen lectures and presentations of leading scientists on climate change. And after about 2 years of my research, I arrived to the several important conclusions, which I will report to you. One of them is we as a nation, as a world, we do not have an understanding on what must be done to combat the climate change. You think that we have an understanding, but we don't. And I will prove it to you during this presentation. We don't have any, not just an idea, we don't have plan, there's nothing. We're just talking about the climate change and reducing carbon dioxide. So I will go into the details later, but this is an obvious observation from as being an owner of income tax and business management company of 20 years. Actually, I'm in business for 20 years, and thus I'm not just a person who is holding a bachelor degree. I actually have an MBA in accounting, and subsequently I am researching and reviewing the information from two angles, scientific and management. And now I'm ready to report to you what is going on, and I will do it from the management perspective. And let me also state one important conclusion. Today we have a complete information on what is going on. So we can make decision today what needs to be done. So now think about yourselves as managers and decision makers. And I'm just a reporting agent on the climate change. So as a managers, you would insist to provide you with a bottom line. Give us a bottom line. And here's the bottom line. The climate change is an irreversible event which will devastate our ecosystem to the point of inability for humans to live normally. That's first. And then it will go further with a rapid climate devastation that we couldn't live at all. Nothing is going to change toward normal. It's not going to come back. It's going to go worse and worse year after year, day after day. So as a part of my research, I joined the Facebook and chatted with people and talked to understand who knows what and give my ideas, to test my ideas. And this is what I arrived to understand, that most of the people think that scientists, and they showing the sources where they took the ideas from, that the scientists tell us that it's all cycle, it's cyclical. So the climate will come back and everything will be fine. But these people actually they miss the point. And the point is that scientists talking about hundreds of thousands of years of the cycles. Nothing will come back soon. It's gonna go to devastate, to complete devastation. And then after hundreds of thousands of years, it potentially can come back if we will not interfere. The second idea that I took from the groups, Facebook groups, that that the other like thing that people thinking that, okay, we can actually adapt, we actually can somehow sustain the changes. And this is also a delusional idea, because the climate, the ecosystem will be destroying. And then, and what's going to happen? Yes, you can sustain for 20, 50 years from now, but then there will be no food, enough food. There will be scarcity for fresh water. For example, if the glaciers are melt, we have the source of fresh water, 69% comes from glaciers. So it will be devastation on many levels, and you cannot adapt to not having enough fresh water. There is no way. Then also, like, if glaciers and ice are melting, there will be some cities will go down maybe in 20, 30 years already under the water, the port cities, and like New York. And what do you do with people who live in those port cities? You have to relocate them. Can you imagine relocate 20, 50 million people? Maybe 10 million people in New York. How many people live in New York and close to New York? And then Miami. And if you say like, no, it is a big deal, but we can adapt. We can move them and everything will be fine. It will be in 30 years or 50 years. And then next thing, okay, but it's not gonna stop with that. The climate will be devastating, and devastation will be continue. So you cannot adapt to the fatal end. So the point is, we must act now, and this presentation is it's a call to act. My conclusion is we must save the melting glaciers, because this is the only key to survive. That, in my mind, there is no other way to do it. It doesn't mean, of course, that we stop on lowering pollutions and growing the forests. We must do many things concurrently, but if we lose the glaciers, we lose the ecosystem, and without ecosystems, there will be no future. Of course, yes, the carbon dioxide is the key element in a global warming, but we must buy time to find the way how to reduce concentration of carbon dioxide gas in the atmosphere. We need time to clean our oceans. We need to buy the time to switch to the green energy. And buying the time means to work on saving the glaciers and the land ice. So that's my scientific conclusion of my research is we must start saving the glaciers. Second conclusion is from the business perspective. It's that we must clarify to the world, to bring more clarity, this event is a deadly and one-directional event. Everybody has to know that. And we need to organize ourselves by uniting all the nations and governments, putting together a plan on how to combat the climate change. It has to be on a global level. And as the reporting agent to you managers, let me report you the plan. And the plan must be as follows. Number one, we must start organizing the rescuing operations for glaciers and land ice. I'm not telling you what we must to do. This is a different issue, and we have to understand how to save the glaciers. This is different. Today we have to just acknowledge that this is the only way to survive. So number one, we have to organize ourselves to save the glaciers, and the time frame as a reporting agent to the managers, I'm putting the time frame. It's about 2-5 years. We don't have much time anymore. And second part of the plan is to continue our research on how to reduce CO2 levels in the atmosphere, continue cleaning oceans, growing the forest, reducing the pollutions, going with the green energy. But we need to start a conversation on the population, on the growth of the population. We need to start the conversation at what point we will be stopping the industrial growth, because this is like we need to exchange this industrial growth into industrial recycling growth. As an example, consider this part is ongoing project for 100-200 years. So next in next part of presentation, I will go into the details of my research. How do I arrive to my conclusions? Basically, why do we have to save the glaciers? Is anything else? So first, let me recall what we hear on the TV and in the media about the climate change. What's a mainstream idea? And we hear constant messages about reducing the pollutions, about the danger of carbon dioxide and fossil fuels. And why nobody is talking about rescuing the glaciers? This is the question. But we hear carbon dioxide part. There are several reasons though. One is that reduction of carbon dioxide gas is indeed very important when you combat the climate change. And the other reason that it's all about the money and political aspect of that climate change. People found the way to make money on the climate change. And this is a problem. Thus, talking and promoting the idea that a reduction of pollutions will somehow suffice that the climate change fight is it's just a money-making machine now. And it's also great political power play. You can put the pressure on the governments. However, nobody again tells you, maybe because maybe they just don't know themselves, that reducing the pollutions on Earth is just the first milestone of 100-200 years process in reduction of the global temperature. We have Earth's temperature rising because we have an excess of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which will be there for more than 100, 200, 500 years. It is slowly goes into the space. It goes away, but slowly. Thus, the reduction of today's emissions of carbon dioxide will help us in about 100 to 200, 500 years from now. And yes, if we don't lower the pollutions today, we will have no chance in 100 years too. But the point is that reduction of human impact of carbon dioxide is not for today's reduction of temperature. It is for the future. So if we stop emitting, we will not reduce today's temperature. It's going to affect, it will be affected like in 100, 200 years. So, but we need like to change the speed of this event. So we must, anyways, we have to reduce the pollutions. So when we need it, in 100, 200, 500 years, we can use it. Because otherwise we cannot do it. And we have to understand that we do it as a long-term treatment by working on reduction of carbon dioxide on a daily basis. It's a daily routine, but it's going to take us many, many centuries. And during these centuries, we actually must to save our ecosystem, because we must save glaciers now as a matter of urgent care, because they are vanishing now. Scientists are modeling that 2/3 of glaciers will be vanished by the end of this century. 95% of the thickest ice on Arctic already is gone. Today is gone. This year, first time ever, Laptev Sea, which is part of the Arctic Ocean, never was frozen during summer of 2020. And let me show you where's the actually Laptev Sea. This is it. This is Laptev Sea. This is Arctic Ocean. It's a part of Arctic Ocean. First time ever it hasn't been frozen during the summer. So, and this is like actually melting glaciers and land ice. It's actually 911 phone call, but there is nobody answering it, and there is no discussion of any kind on a program of how to rescue the glaciers. It's basically reporting, we're on a reporting mode. Let me just prove it to you. This is from NASA.
As a scientist, when I look at these trends, I am concerned, where are we going to go from here? That is why we keep studying this. So NASA has a number of field campaigns that are trying to understand Arctic processes. And I think that it's really important that we keep up the study and try to better understand what is happening and what does that mean for people 50, 100 years down the road.
So as you hear, it's just like they will be keep studying and understanding in 50, 150 years down the road. But we know that in 50, 100 years down the road, there will be potentially no ecosystem sustainable to live for humans. So this is NASA. And actually the reason is that we are standing by, not doing anything. I think because everything is politicized right now and monetized. We created a new reality within the climate change. Everybody knows that we have to reduce the carbon dioxide, period. There's nothing else. But when I talk to people and I say like, we must save the glaciers. People look at me and in some kind of disbelief what I'm talking about. And they think it's not possible. But if you understood that without the glaciers, there is no future for life. You have to get on board to realize that things actually can be possible, because you have to be proactive. Once you understand that we cannot do otherwise, so we have to do something, then we need to find the ways to do it. And everything is possible when the powerful people in charge put in the goals. They tell us that not to us, but to the appropriate agency to do it. Actually, I will give you an example. In 1969, actually 1961, nobody would imagine that we can just put a person on the moon. But what actually happened was that Soviet Union sent a man into the space. It was in April 12, 1961. It was Yuri Gagarin who went to, like, first person going to space. And then it was a period of the Cold War between Soviet Union and United States. And then, as a part of a response to the Soviet Union success, in 1961, on May 1961, President J.F. Kennedy addressed the Congress, and he said that he's got a vision that we actually must and we can put the man on the moon and safely bring him back. Well, in 1969, that actually happened. So this example demonstrates that we just need to set the goal from the top, and it will happen. However, this is not the only problem on how to start the project of saving the glaciers. The other problem is how to get the information to the top. So we know we have to save the glaciers, or we think we know. Now we have to just somehow deliver the message. Well, today we have two main climate change political organizations which are founded and they actually founded and they supported by the scientists. And the international organization, one is Intergovernmental Panel on the Climate Change, or IPCC. This organization has 195 members, representative from the governments of different countries. This panel gets reporting from the thousands of scientists around the world. They discuss their findings, they ask questions, and then they create their recommendations to the world. This panel has been created in 1988. Though since its inception till now, there has been no recommendations or talk on or about how to save the glaciers. The other major organization is Paris Accord, which was created based on agreement between 195 countries back in 2015. So it's actually, this is not a, it's been, countries came together and they didn't create the body, they actually created the body by putting everybody on the same page with signing the agreement to lower carbon dioxide and committing to lower the temperature on the Earth within this century, like lowering 1 or 2 degrees. But they also never talked about saving the glaciers. Everybody's concentrating on reducing the carbon dioxide. And this is pathetic, and I will tell you later why. I will prove it, not tell you, already told you, but because there's nothing can be done with lowering carbon dioxide today. It's matter of the future of 100 or 200 years or even more. But also besides these two bodies, we have climate activists, climate change activists. I will give you example of two major, I think, in my opinion. They are Al Gore and Greta Thunberg. They're just an example. So as the most recognizable names within the climate change event, their main focus is also reduction of carbon dioxide. Yes, of course, Greta talked about the ecosystems on her speech to addressing the Congress, dying ecosystem. But it's just words. They activists. They just furthering their knowledge to people that there is a climate change and we need to do something about it. But they don't have a plan. They're funded, actually. They could have done something. They have money to create a plan or to fund the ideas what to do, instead of just telling us that there is a climate change, which is also important. But now we at the point, and also like as we agreed, you're the managers and I'm a reporting agent. And as an agent, I have to not just report you the problem, I have to report you how to solve the problem. So merely talking about the problem doesn't do any good. So, okay, like the ship is sinking. Okay, we got it. That's a great idea. So what do we do about that? Okay, now think about this as a summary of how we cannot present the main idea to the governments so they can just know what to do or just get some ideas on what to do. Think about this. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was created 32 years ago. Paris Agreement was established 5 years ago. Al Gore, after inventing the internet, he has been like alarming us about the danger of carbon dioxide for maybe 10-15 years. Greta Thunberg, via her organization, is demanding some actions to save the ecosystem and reduction the carbon dioxide. They doing just political stand. Nobody explaining in simple words what is going on, why we have to reduce the carbon dioxide, will it help us? They don't present the simple plan what we have to do. And I'm not just talking about Greta, I'm not talking about Al Gore, the activists. I'm talking the bodies like Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change is the most respectable body of on the climate change, supported by thousands of scientists on the climate change. Paris Accord, this is like a body that drive now kind of like, right, the ideas on how do we solve the problem on climate change. And they all are talking about reducing the carbon dioxide. Nobody talks about dying, vanishing glaciers and melting ice. So that's a problem. And let me go deeper, because you see, I started with the idea. I explained why this idea. Now I just want to go a little bit deeper into the science on why is it important to save the glaciers and why is it not important currently, not just important for today's temperature to reduce the carbon dioxide. It's important, but it will not make any difference. I'm going to go now deeper in the science. So if you can see, we have scientists and organizations for so many years and decades that they didn't come up with any simplified idea of what is going on, and everybody is just talking about the reduction of carbon dioxide as kind of a solution, which is not. And if you remember at the beginning, I told you that we have all the information, we have all the data to make this decision what we must do in terms of fighting and combating the climate change. So let me just go to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and their report, the summary for policymakers, dated 2013. This summary was prepared by hundreds of international scientists on the climate change. They stated, and let me go to the slide because I think it's important that you can see it. They stated that cumulative emissions of carbon dioxide largely determine global mean surface warming by the late 21st century and beyond. Most aspects of climate change will persist for many centuries, even if emissions of carbon dioxide are stopped. So this is the panel, this is the God of the scientists on the climate change. They tell us wherever, like if we stop all the pollutions, it will not help us. Because this, as I continue, represents the substantial multi-century climate change commitment created by the past, present, and future emissions of carbon dioxide. And let me show you, this is a summary of policymakers and look how many scientists, their names and the countries they representing. This is the summary of policymakers, dated 2013. So that's that. Let me just close that window. So again, it means that even we stop today all emissions by humans, the climate will still be deteriorating, and we are basically doomed. Then why everybody is saying that we need to reduce pollutions? It is pointless. And that's why I have this presentation, basically. I'm offering to fight the climate change by restoring the ecosystem, starting with slowing the process of melting glaciers as a priority. Because thus, we will buy the time to find a way to control the carbon dioxide, potentially grab it from the atmosphere, while also we will be fixing the rest of our ecosystem. So next, I want to talk about the climate change model, because when you come to our website, you potentially will kind of get confused or something, because we talk about the climate change model, and our climate change model is merely a chain of the events of how the climate change started, what are the major forces that affect climate change, and what needs to be done. Again, today nobody created and simplified understanding on how we arrive to climate changing. And that's why I want to just do something about that. I created the climate change model simply as a chain of events in a simple way. Because if we start going into the details, we will be confused and arguing about, because we don't know enough. Even I said like we know enough, but not in a way that we know what drives what. We know today how to fight it, what's important, but we don't know details of all the events, because so many forces, so many processes going on, which every process creates a positive feedback for the other process. And we're thinking that humans actually responsible for the climate change, which is we are, but in a way the nature is also responsible. And that's why the climate change model, what I will present, will show you in a chain of events that the nature has started its responsibility on the climate change. So let me open the window for the graph of the concentration, and let me just open it first for the graph on the concentration of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This graph is for 800,000 years. And looking at this graph, we understand, we see that the changes in a concentration of carbon dioxide, it's cyclical. And we know, and if we don't know, we should know that carbon dioxide correlates with the temperature, and it's responsible for the climate, because most of the scientists, 99% today, they agree that carbon dioxide is the major component and major driver on the climate. So, and there is a direct correlation between the increase of the concentration of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with the rise of the temperature. And so look at this. This is 800,000 years ago, and there are peaks every almost 100 years or so. There are peaks in the concentration of carbon dioxide. And hey, if we look, this is nowadays kind of, right? Because this is 100,000 years before, but this is kind of nowadays. And the climate came to its peak of the concentration of carbon dioxide. So the climate change didn't start from the Industrial Revolution. Climate is always changing, but it came to its peak, kind of one of the peaks, just before the industrial or with Industrial Revolution. This is just a chance that it just came up together, accident actually. And look at this graph. This is first is this is the, now it's for 250 years, right? 270 years, not 800,000 years. This is little part of this time frame. So now we in nowadays, and we started 280 parts per millions. This is right there, 280 parts per millions. So this is the atmospheric concentration, this purple line, and the blue, navy blue line is actually represent the human impact, the pollutions, emissions. So if you look at this graph, you have to realize that up to some point of 1900, emissions were immaterial. Yes, they were accumulating, but they were immaterial to climate change, it's all like, if this part is showing the emissions in billions of tons, this is like almost nothing until sometime like in 1950. So even like in 1930, it's not a big deal for the climate to change just because in 30 years there were more emissions. Because you have to understand that emissions should go to the atmosphere and become a part of the atmosphere and then affect back to the climate on Earth. It's not a direct process like the carbon dioxide go into the atmosphere and right away affect it. People would say, yeah, but it was going on from 1750. It's immaterial. And then let's go to the temperature. This is also like, this is where we are, like 1750, right? If you go back, this is 1750. The carbon dioxide emissions were immaterial low. The temperature was not changing either. So, but starting from sometime 1900, 1910, because you cannot see from this point, you have to go to this graph. From 1910, it started going up without coming back. The temperature started going up from 1910. So then you go back and you say, why would it go up from 1910? What was the driving force for rapidly changing the climate? And you can see on this graph that it's not just it start rising rapidly. That's the key. It's something has happened to the climate. It's not like little event by little event. It's something strike the climate that it's responded drastically. Because if you say like, no, from 17 that there was industrial revolution and it started 1750 and it was accumulated. No, something happened, because again, if we go back, this is not enough accumulation to start the climate change. And then you say like, no, you see, you don't understand, because it's been accumulating, and thus it went to the atmosphere. Think again, because all of that should be deposited within oceans. It's so immaterial, it could be deposited within the oceans, trees. It's so immaterial to change the climate, because it's right here. Today, even like with all rapid depositing emissions, billions of tons, we still, most of it or part of it goes to the oceans. But how we even concluded that little emissions comparably will change the climate within several years, because like starting 1750, it's not even material to do anything. And what happened during 1910 or so, that the climate start changing. On June 30th, 1908, Tunguska Event happened. This Tunguska Event, it's some kind of an object which came from the space in diameter of about 160 feet. It's small compared to the asteroid which destroyed the dinosaurs. And that object crashed over the atmosphere above, like in 10 miles above of the surface of the Earth. It didn't hit the surface. It happened over the northern Russia, over the Siberia. It burned about 80 million trees. It burned like 2,000 acres or something. I don't remember right now, but it burned a huge area. And then the devastation, the estimation of this blast, scientists thinking that it's about hundreds to thousands of the equal to the blast of thousands of atomic bombs thrown on Hiroshima during World War II. I argue that this event actually triggered this rapid climate change, and it starts going dramatically up. The temperature started. And why I'm thinking this has happened, and you say like, you're crazy because this is a small object. But think about the forest, dried forest, and there was somebody driving PCH or in some place, PCH is Pacific Highway in Los Angeles, and somebody throw their cigarette. And because it's a dry weather, the forest, Santa Monica forest, Malibu forest, it start burning. And with the wind, it start like burning everything. So from little cigarette, we can burn lots of like acres and acres and acres of trees. Think about the nature which was ready at this point. The nature has been on the top as the forest was dry, the weather was dry, and the forest was ready to be burned. That's how the nature was ready to blast. And the Tunguska event actually came and start some kind of processes that created more positive feedbacks, potentially with the water vapor, and so many other things could be happening. But what I'm saying is just simple. It doesn't matter what triggered the process on Earth, but it wasn't due to the emissions from humans. It wasn't industrial revolution, because it wasn't enough carbon dioxide at the beginning. Again, if we go to this slide, there was no enough carbon dioxide emissions to start that temperature increase. It has to go first. This part, it had to go first to the atmosphere, so then affect the climate change. And the climate change started rapidly, that it forced the temperatures going rapidly, like suddenly the concentration of carbon dioxide has changed right there somehow rapidly, but it wasn't. This part should be deposited to the oceans. It shouldn't be matter as much to start the climate change. And what it means actually, that something, and forget about Tunguska event or not, but during that time, something started the processes within the nature which created the initial increase of the temperature. Thus, to fight back the climate change, we must subside those processes. We need to restore our ecosystem as a starting point. And the emergency task is to start saving the glaciers and the land ice. And the long-term treatment is reduction of carbon dioxide emissions. And with that, I want to thank you for the for enduring this presentation. Thank you for your feedback. I hope you will send emails and comment. Thank you so much, and thank you. Take care.